else. There's 3 layers. Let's start with layer 1, global. So if you zoom all the way out, the top 1% of countries in the world do things differently than the rest of them. And we can measure the productivity of a country by something called GDP, which is gross domestic product per capita. Now, the per capita part just means how much total production the economy does. So just think revenue, think sales. And then per capita is per person. And so this allows us to normalize different countries that are big countries versus small countries and see how much the individual is making. Now, the reason this is so important and why we start at layer 1 global is because if you even out everything, you will be able to see the strongest levers on wealth creation because they're just done in aggregate. And to be clear, within each country, of course, there are some people that get way more of that slice of the pie than others. But even at the global level, there are some countries that get more of the slice of the pie than other countries. And so, for example, the United States has the largest GDP in the world, and Tuvalu has the smallest. Now, per capita, it shifts around. Luxembourg is actually the country in the world that has the highest GDP per person, so 151,000. Now, I'll give you an example of number 2, which is Singapore. They have the second highest GDP per capita and is also the home of Michael, who's our media director. And the reason they were able to do that is because they invest these countries in 2 major categories. Number 1 is education, and number 2 is technology. And so if you look at GDP per capita for a country, the increases can almost directly be tied by reinvestments in education and technology. Singapore has $148,000 in gross domestic product per capita. Now, how do they have that? Well, the entire culture in Singapore is flipped compared to, say, the United States. Teachers, believe it or not, there are actually seen as one of the most prestigious positions that you can hold. And they're paid very well because the country understands that attracting good teachers is one of the ways to make the country more competitive long term. And so if we think about this at a global level, which I think is important, is what are the inputs that every country has that's even? The inputs are time and bodies. And so at the very basic level, anybody at all these countries at level 0 can do menial labor, which is basically things that require no skill to do. So if I had a conveyor belt of switchboards and I had to plug 2 things in, another one comes in, I plug 2 things in, it's typically something that you can train someone to do in about 5 minutes. And then you're just basically having them trade their time and doing this very simple task repetitively. Now, that is typically not valued nearly as highly as other skills, which is why countries will invest in technology and education. The education so that they have more skills, the technology to do 3 things. Technology does, number 1, it allows you to do more of what you currently do. So that switchboard person, if there wasn't a conveyor belt in front of them, wouldn't be able to do nearly as many of those things as someone who did. The second thing is that technology allows you to do what you can already do even better. And so think of both of those in terms of units of time, because remember, this is one of the key inputs that everybody has that's even. Whether you're in the richest country in the world or the poorest country in the world, every single person has the same 24 hours. And yet some countries massively outcompete other ones, just like some individuals in every individual economy massively outcompete people within them, which will peel back in layer 2. Let's think about it like this. If you have a brain and 2 hands, then what allows you to do more with that brain and 2 hands? Well, technology lowers the skill requirement to do anything, right? Like if you had to figure out how to build a house but you couldn't use tools, you'd have to have a tremendous amount of skills. But all of a sudden, if you have a saw and you have some nails, then you wouldn't have to figure out how to like break trees and interlock them and do all sorts of craziness, right? That's at a very basic level. But on top of that, it allows you to do more of what you're already doing. So that means you're doing more per unit of time. Remember, everything's going to be traced back to time. Or you do higher quality, which also is traced back to time because maybe it would take you a longer period of time to make something that good, or it would just simply be impossible. Right? Which is why it's such an advantage that in the early days of smartphones, and I don't even know if they still do this anymore, but you're not allowed to use a smartphone when you take tests because it's such an advantage that it shifts the whole curve. Which I think, by the way, they should allow you to do that because that's how the real world is, and I think the point of school is to prepare you for it. And so imagine you have 2 different sets of people. You've got 100 people on one side and 100 people on the other. And the 100 people on one side have electricity, Wi-Fi, internet, computers, versus the others don't. Well, which one's going to produce more economic value? Obviously the one on the left. Not because these people are inherently better than the others, they just have technology on their side, right? And so we have to think about ourselves from the country all the way down using the same tools. So at the first layer, the wealthiest people in the world, the 0.1%, invest